Back in the day, my grandpa used to go to the nearby town from his village for various purposes, leaving early morning and returning by night. The town was about 15 kilometers from the village, and then, at that time, rural areas were not connected properly to electricity fields. Through the outskirts and the fields, it got difficult to see the path and reach the village after it got dark. Being a relatively rich man, he had helped many fellow villagers. One such person was Shankar, a farmer who owed a huge debt to my grandpa. Grandpa had lent him a large sum of money for the marriage of his daughter, and at the time of dire need. As such, he respected and revered my grandpa with a lot of gratitude. One day, it got very, very late when grandpa was coming back. He was finding it hard to see the road and had lost his way. As it was raining season, he was finding it even more difficult to reach the village through the puddles. After toying in the dark for a while, grandpa was getting very worried when a familiar voice called him from behind. It was Shankar with the lamp in his hand. Shankar immediately told Grandpa to start walking as he used the lamp from behind to show the path. He strictly told Grandpa not to look back. Not giving it much thought, Grandpa started walking. Throughout the path, he conversed with Shankar, asking how his daughter was doing and how his crops were coming around, as they discussed the roads and the rain in the village, and not once did Grandpa look back. Soon they arrived at the brink of the houses. Shankar left saying he couldn't go any further, as he had somewhere else to go. Grandpa went on by himself and kept walking until he observed an assembly of people standing, discussing something. When they told him what they were discussing about, Grandpa froze. Shankar had passed away that day. It wasn't someone who had shown him the path. It was something. Shankar had returned from death to acknowledge his debt and provide help to my grandpa when he needed it. This happened to me when I was in my first year of BTech in 2008. It was my first semester in the institute, and I was leaving for college to attend an annual Viva exam. I recently started driving a two-wheeler, and I was always extra cautious whenever someone sat behind me, especially as it was difficult for me to balance on the two wheels when there was someone sitting in the back wearing a charret. My college was in my hometown and just about 3 kilometers away from my home. It was the month of January and it was drizzling then. On my way to college, there comes an unpaved road which gets muddy due to heavy rain. On my way to that road, I found a lady who was stopping me and asked if I could drop her somewhere nearby, as it was getting difficult for her to walk on that slippery road. I replied to her, "Auntie, it's difficult for me to ride a two-wheeler when someone sits behind me. Also, the roads are very slippery. There are chances that we may fall." Even after several denials, she still asked to sit behind, and I let her. She then asked me to drive. I started driving. I was pretty comfortable while driving. I didn't expect it to be an easy ride. I felt that I needed to come over my fear though. So after a few moments I asked her, "Auntie, where do you want to go?" And in a cold tone, she replied, "Where you have to go." It scared the hell out of me. I mean, how does she know where I want to go? So I reduced my vehicle speed and kept driving. We weren't talking, and a few minutes later, she said, "Stop here." Without wasting a second, I stopped my vehicle, and the moment I turned back, she wasn't there. I called my mum immediately, and she was frightened when I told her about this. Just to calm me down, she said, "You never allowed me to sit behind you. It took a ghost to ride?" She laughed. I really don't know who she was, and I never saw her ever again on my way to college. I have to thank my friend for motivating me to share this incident. And just to make it a little clearer for everybody, I was driving an 80cc Bargy Sprint, so it was obvious to feel her weight whilst I was driving all the way. When I was in my early 20s, my date and I decided to go to the Sail Inn in West Sacramento to play pool. We'd been there before and enjoyed speaking with the bartender. I can't recall her name, but she was beautiful and an engaging woman. This particular night we walked in and noticed that the pool table was occupied. There was a man and a woman shooting a game, so my date bought us some drinks while we watched. After a few minutes, the man noticed me and struck up conversation with me. When my date came over with our drinks, the man asked us if we wanted to shoot a game with them. It didn't occur to me at the time that his female companion hadn't said anything yet. So we said yes. He racked up the balls and we played against them. During the game we introduced ourselves, and right after the man began asking some personal questions that really started to bother me, like, where did I live, had my date and I been dating long, did we live together, etc. I noticed the man and his friend keep looking at each other. I became increasingly uncomfortable, even though the rest of the conversation began and was pleasant in nature. Weirdly, the woman still had said nothing. When the game was over, the man asked us if we wanted to leave with them and go to another bar down the street. At first, I didn't say anything. The guy asked us again, saying they discovered a cool bar not far from where we were. My date and I looked at each other, and before he could say anything, I blurted out, "No thanks, we have dinner plans." In fact, we didn't, but my date didn't argue with me. I think he saw the panic on my face. We both grabbed our jackets and got the hell out of there. By the time we walked out the door, the hair was literally standing up on the back of my neck. When we got back to my truck, my date asked me what was wrong. I told him that I got a horrible feeling about those people and just knew we had to get away from them. I told him it was weird that he asked us to leave with them when he didn't check with his date first. My date just shrugged and said okay, though I think he thought I was crazy. A few days later, when I opened up the afternoon paper, there was an article about a woman from West Sacramento who had been found murdered. I didn't think anything of it until I got to the page where the article was continued, and the picture of the woman practically leapt out of the page at me. It was the beautiful bartender from Sail Inn. Apparently, she'd been kidnapped, raped, and killed the very night I was there with my date. I was totally creeped out and thought what a crazy coincidence that it was, and how sad that it was that she had died so horribly. It wasn't until a month or so later that I realized why I had gotten so upset that night. A man and a woman had just been arrested for the bartender's murder, along with the murders of several other people, 4 of whom were couples. There on the front page of the Sacramento Bee were the pictures of the killers, Gerald and Charlene Gallagher, the very couple who invited my date and I to go with them to another bar. And apparently this was one of the ruses that they used to get their victims into their van. My heart did flip-flops in my chest as I read the article. Not only had we been targeted as their next serial killer victims, when we turned them down, they selected another target because of me. I have lived with both the relief and guilt all my life because of this. Intellectually, I know it's not my fault that the bartender died, but I've always wondered how different the world would have been had she been able to live out her life, even though I would have been gone myself. Needless to say, that was the end of my bar date experiences for a long, long, long time. Update. I just found out that Charlene Gallagher has been living in Sacramento under an assumed name. Apparently she was paroled there after serving her prison term. She has been making amends for her horrors by performing works of charity. Gerald Gallagher died in prison before he could be executed. I know good old Jerry got what he deserved, but I'm not sure how I feel about Charlene living as a free woman. She claimed on the stand to have been manipulated by Jerry, which is why she went along on the killing spree. Maybe that's why she never said anything in the bar. Maybe she was under his complete control. So much that she couldn't even speak in public. I would love to have a private chat with her. This is a long story, so please bear with me. This is a story from my uncle's life, so it all belongs to him. In the first person, this was told to me by my uncle, so here we go. This is not a conventional ghost story. It has a paranormal entity involved, but it turned out to be a noble one as I found out. It was back in 1996, November 17th, when I was about 21. I was on my way home to Hanai to visit my grandparents' house in Kokkan region. I had left Mumbai late the afternoon and had a flat tire on the way, so was delayed unexpectedly. Hanai is a famous beach village in Kokkan. There are 2 routes to get to Hanai, and I took the shortest one, as it was getting pretty late. The only concern about it is it was a deserted and lonely route. It was about 11:30 p.m. when I was on the outskirts of Mandagad, on my way to Kishi. I was surprised to see a girl waving her hand to my car. There was a small hill on the right side of the road and a house at some distance where the girl may have popped up from. Nevertheless, I stopped my car. The girl was around 15 to 16 years old. Coming close to the passenger side seat, she knocked on the glass. I pulled down the glass and looked at her. She was strikingly sweet looking, and there was this feeling of calmness on her face. She was wearing a salwar kameez with a dupa wrap around her ears to prevent the cold. I asked her what the matter was, to which she replied, "I need to go to Anjal urgently. Will you drop me?" I was bored on the long drive. It's about 7 hours, and the delay had made it even longer anyway. And since Anjal was on the way, I decided to give her the ride. At least I have found someone to talk to, rather than just listening to songs and driving. She sat on the passenger seat and we moved on. We started talking after some time. She told me her name was Ratna and that she had gone to see her uncle. Unfortunately, she had missed the last bus and had to get back home urgently as she was still in the 10th grade and had to start school early that morning. I was taken aback completely and I asked her how her uncle could allow her to travel alone at this hour of the day, to which she replied that she wanted to leave early, but her uncle said that he would drop her after dinner, and he caught a fever, so she had no other option. We kept chatting, and on our way, various topics came up. In about an hour, we had crossed Kilshi and were approaching Angarli. When she asked me to stop the car, I stopped and looked around. On my right side, there was a beach, and on the left was a small hill. Where was this girl planning to go? She got down out of the car, and I asked her where she was going to go, to which she replied that her home was just behind the hill. I offered to walk her to the hill for her safety, and she replied very calmly, "No, you don't need to come with me any further. I will meet you again someday. You can go." I noticed the change in her voice. She was pointing towards Argali village. Her face was motionless. I was about to say something, but she gave me such a look that I decided not to argue with her anymore. I got back into the car and moved on. In about half an hour, I reached my grandparents' house, and they were both very surprised to see me getting to them so late. I told them about the whole incident, including my encounter with Ratna. They both warned me not to stop there ever again, as that area is known for being haunted at night. As I didn't believe in the paranormal, I turned a deaf ear and went to bed. I had a couple of days rest and visited a couple of friends in some different places. We decided collectively that we should go have a day trip in Angarli Beach. After some time on the beach, as we were relaxing, I saw a figure coming down the hill. It was a man about 40 coming down the road. He was surprised to see us at the beach, as it is a very lonely one. I asked him where did he stay, to which he replied he stayed on the other side of the hill. Something struck my mind. That was the exact location that Ratna had mentioned. I casually inquired about his family, to which he replied he had a wife, 2 sons, but no daughter. I asked him if there was another home nearby, to which he replied that his was the only home there, and the rest were fields. So I asked him if he knew about a girl by the name of Ratna staying nearby. He gave me a weird look the moment I asked about her. Ratna was my daughter. She passed away 10 years ago. I had the shock of my life. I couldn't utter a word for a few moments. Slowly I gathered myself. How was it possible that the girl I met a couple of days ago had been dead for 10 years? I told him that I had dropped Ratna at that very point 2 nights back. He looked at me weirdly, so I told him the whole story about how I picked her up at her uncle's after he had suddenly gotten ill and she had missed her last bus. He listened to me carefully and told me after I finished the story that Ratna was indeed coming from her uncle on the night that she had died. His brother was there at the time and had gotten ill. Ratna had hitched a ride in a car. she had missed the bus. The car met an accident at the very point. As the driver was tired and fell asleep while driving, he survived with multiple injuries, but Ratna died on the spot. I was not convinced. It was possible that the girl that I was speaking about was a different girl, but with the same name. So I walked along with him to his house on the other side of the hill. The moment I entered his house, I saw a girl's photograph on the wall with a flower garnered around it. No doubt it was the same girl whom I had met a couple of days earlier. She was the daughter of the farmer who had passed away 10 years ago. As I was standing there, suddenly a thought crossed my mind. What would have happened if I insisted on walking her to the house? How would she have reacted to that? I had met her on the 17th of November. To my astonishment, her brother said that that was the same day that she had met her end 10 years earlier. I had cold sweat run down my spine. I inquired carefully with the family if anyone had encountered or felt her presence ever around, or if anyone had seen her like I did in the last 10 years, to which everyone replied that they hadn't. I made a few inquiries around both villages, as well as in Kelshi during my stay, asking if anyone had given a ride to a little girl. I could not find a single person who had ever met her. After my vacations were over, I drove back on the same road to my home. I could not separate her thoughts from my mind, and tried to have as much clarification as possible. I had no doubt in my mind that the girl I had met was the farmer's daughter, as I could make it out clearly from her photograph. The details she had told me about her activities in the night that she had died had matched perfectly with the information I was given about what happened to her 10 years ago. Some questions which remained in my mind, though. There was one. Where was she in these last 10 years? 2. What made her come back suddenly after 10 years? 3. Of all people, why did she meet me the day exactly 10 years after her death? 4. Why did she say, "I'll meet you again"? Was I supposed to have another encounter with her? I was sure of one thing, that she didn't have any intention to hurt me or scare me. Had that been her intention, she would have had all the opportunities as I was with her for an hour or so. Days passed on. Slowly the memories of my encounter with Ratna faded. I had joined a new job and was really busy with my office and other activities that I had not had a chance to visit Hanai for a couple of years. So I thought I had to visit my grandparents again, but it was very difficult for me to find vacation time from the office. However, I had managed to get some time in a week to be able to leave the office and decided to take a trip to Hanai. The moment I thought of the trip, Ratna's memories came rushing back. Will I meet her again this time? I asked. What if I meet her now? What should I ask? What would she do if I met her? I was not afraid and was now looking forward to the encounter. I left Mumbai late, keeping in mind to reach Mumbai about 11 p.m. in the night. But this time, there was no signs of her. I waited at the spot for 10 minutes, anticipating that she would make an appearance, but no avail. Thinking that it was a chance encounter, I moved on. Another year passed, and I happened to visit Hanai again to see my grandfather, as he had organized a get-together for our entire family at his home. My parents had left earlier, and I was supposed to join a couple of days later. Once I was on my way again to Hanai, leaving Mumbai late in the day, busy with my daily schedule, thoughts of Ratna came back into my mind. I left the NH3 to reach Bandagad at about 11:30, and as I reached the same spot where I had picked her up about 3 years back, I saw her again. However, this time she was not waving me down, but was expecting me to stop. As she approached my car, I looked at my watch, and the date showed 17th of November. She calmly opened the door of the car, and without a word, it was the same sawal kismes she was wearing on the day, the same calm expression as it was 3 years ago. I was not scared at all by her presence, because I was sure she didn't mean to hurt me. As we moved on, she asked me, "So, you know about me. Are you not scared?" I told her I was surprised to know about her, but was not scared, as I knew she didn't intend to hurt me at all. She nodded understandingly, but warned me though that everyone is not like her, and some are very nasty. I had so many questions on my mind after our first encounter. I had taken a keen interest in the paranormal, and had read lots of books and met a few people in the field. Now that I had a paranormal entity sitting right next to me, I was in a situation. It was one of its own kind. I started asking her questions, one after the other, and she answered all of them with detailed information. The information she gave me was so detailed that I cannot give it all here, as I had already read many books on the subject. It was confirmation of what I had read from her. She told me what exactly happens at the time of death and immediately afterwards. I asked her where she was for 10 years after her death, and after our first encounter, to which she replied that she was in Bahagluk, in form of a small physique, which was made up of thin air. Why did she choose to communicate with me that day? To which she replied, it was because I was the first person with whom she could communicate at subconscious levels. There was something more as a relationship between us that she did not disclose. It was not possible for everyone to interact with paranormal entities, and it's the other way around as well. Paranormal entities cannot communicate with everyone who they choose. Why could I not see her last year on my way to Hanai? She replied that she could not take a human form that night, though she was able to see me waiting for her to appear. I asked how long would she be in that state and would make appearances. She said her lifespan was supposed to be a few more years. Because she had died in an accident, she had to spend those remaining years before she could progress to the next section of life, or to be reborn, which is mortal world unless she's instructed otherwise. I asked her how long was the span, and she replied that she didn't know exactly the amount of time. I asked her, what if I wanted to meet her sometime or somewhere else? She said that she had no restrictions of place, but she could not meet me frequently whenever I wanted to, as it would be interfering with the strict restrictions to which every paranormal entity is bound by, and would prolong her stay. We had reached the spot where she had died. She recounted the whole incident to me, how it happened. She had died instantly after she was thrown out of the car in the accident, and her head hit a stone. We continued our conversation for some time. She had been helping people near death to get used to paranormal life after her death, as this was her assigned task. After some time, she said, "It's time for her to go now." So I asked her, "Will we meet again?" She replied that she can meet me anywhere as she had said earlier, but I have to be very careful to be alone, and it can preferably be after evening. Also, I have to ensure that the meetings are not frequent. I assured her that I would not interfere in her world and would be glad to meet her when it is possible for her, and she herself appears before me again. I got in my car and moved on. I had met her for a second time. I didn't have any encounter with Rutner for a year or so after that. My dad had retired from his office job and he was looking to get a new home in the suburbs. We had almost finalized the apartment and were about to sign the deal. After a discussion with the property dealer for the price and the bank regarding the loan, I came home exhausted after a long day. I have a habit of taking a long walk after dinner. As I was too tired that day, I just went to the terrace of my apartment for a stroll. As I entered the terrace, there was nobody there. I began walking up and down the terrace and I started to do my third round. I saw someone standing on the other corner. I wondered who it could be, as I had the door behind me closed and was certain that whoever it was didn't come in with me. I walked at a normal pace and reached over near the person, and it was none other than Rutner. She had appeared on my terrace this time. I was happy to see her again, but before she said anything, she said very curtly, "Don't go there. I came today only to tell you this. It is not a good place for you." I was startled. Why did she say that? It was a really nice apartment, and we had bargained a lot with the property dealer, and I had taken a lot of pain to get the loan from the banks, and now this girl was putting me off. I asked her why. She just insisted that I do not take the apartment. But she refused to give me any other details. She flatly told me that it was not good for me and my family. That's all. I could sense the definite concern and urge in her voice about stopping us moving there. That moment itself, I decided to cancel the deal. I told her that I won't go there, at which point she smiled and just went on her way to the other corner of the terrace. As I watched, she just mixed away into the thin air and disappeared. Later on, I came to know the previous owner of the apartment had committed suicide, and prior to that there was a murder that had occurred in the apartment. Perhaps that's the reason Rutner wanted to keep me away from there. I had a few more encounters with Rutner. I asked her once if I can take a picture, but she refused. She told me many details of life beyond death and different kinds of paranormal entities, and about the powerhouse we call as God. My wife also happened to see her once before we were married. I clearly remember the date as the 10th of September 2005. It was the last time we had seen her. She told me that time had come for her to move on to a different life and that we won't meet again. She blessed us and left without ever coming back. To this date, I have not seen her again. I hope wherever she is, in whatever state she stays, that she's happy. I wonder what was between the two of us that kept bringing her back again and again. I can only guess that there was some sort of relation between us for sure. Though I have read and heard many horror stories, this one horrified me the most. and it is a true story that happened to my friend. One late winter night, he was travelling from Jaipur to Delhi on a bike with his friend who was riding on it. Needless to say, it was dark, with the occasional truck which you will encounter on any of the national highways during night time. My colleague was riding Apollon when he saw his friend looking intently on his side with a complete 90-degree turn of his head. His friend's face was white with horror. He casually asked what had happened. His friend asked him just to shut up. Confused and panicked, he just kept quiet till around 10 to 15 minutes, where his friend stopped and told him to go into the temple, which was lit. They were just walking to the temple when an old man asked his friend, "You saw her?" His white with horrified face was enough to answer. So the old man asked them to pay a visit to the temple and carry on their journey. They did as they were told and continued. It was only when they reached their destination in the morning that his friend had the guts to describe what he had seen. He said that he saw a woman dressed as a bride running with their motorcycle facing him. First, he wondered how she could catch up with the bike and keep up with its speed. It was only then that he realized that she was not human. He froze with anticipation as to what else she could do and was unable to avert his eyes from her expressionless face. That was when he stopped at the temple. He kept looking at the supernatural creature whilst he was riding the bike, but my colleague said that he saw or felt nothing. This story reinforces my belief that there are things other than us and beyond our comprehension. The thought that fires up my imagination whenever I'm in a horrifying situation. In the late 1980s, I was sitting in the little grill section of a major New Orleans grocery store. I had my 10-month-old and my 7-year-old daughter with me. We were having a snack and waiting for my 6-year-old daughter to finish her piano lessons a few blocks away. I was sitting in a booth with my baby, and my 7-year-old was on the other seat facing me. The store was jam-packed as usual. There were no open seats at the grill. I was listening to the chatter from my daughter and just scanning the area with my eyes when they landed on a single man in a booth facing me. He was wearing a t-shirt and running shorts. He was smiling at me oddly. I thought to myself, what a weirdo. After just mindlessly looking around the area for a while, my eyes fell on the weird guy again. But this time he had his testicles hanging out of his shorts and were just resting them there on the plastic bench seat that other people used. I could tell that he knew that I had seen and that he was thrilled. I was trying to gather myself and not have my daughter turn around to see that. No one else had noticed it at all. I was afraid to leave in case he followed us to the car. Just as I decided to have an employee call security, he took it all out and was sitting there in a public place with children around, pleasuring himself. He seemed very pleased with himself to think that he had traumatized me. I stood up, baby on my hip, and yelled loudly, "Look, that man's got his private parts out. He's trying to scare people with his privates hanging out." Well, he tried to pull his stupid running shorts up and stand up at the same time. This was where 2 male customers and a security guard were almost to his booth. He tripped over and fell face first. His shorts were still halfway down, so everyone in the room could see his ass. He didn't seem to be too thrilled now that he was exposed. I gathered our things and had my daughter close her eyes as we passed to get out. The last thing I saw was the customer throwing French fries and hot dogs at him. Kia ora akahoa. Grim here. And, well, that has been my true life stories. The last one, whilst very disturbing, was kind of funny. Any time I read a story where someone starts talking about an embarrassing moment where an ass is shown, it takes a lot of me to control that childish impulse that I have as a male to laugh. But I will not be laughing because that was very, very, very gross, but I can tell why these people were very uncomfortable. Now, I've just recently started the Buy Me a Coffee app. I don't know if any of you guys know about that, but if you want to buy a coffee and help out the channel, feel free to do so. But there is no obligation, please. I just did it because I've been told it's a good idea to give it a start. Outside of all of that, and to keep us moving forward, I just want to do the usual. Please remember, if you liked these narrations of these stories, then like and subscribe. There will be more. There will be interesting, scary, funny, comedic horror stories, whatever I can really find on the channel. Now, I want to do my usual here and make sure that I wish all of you a good night or day, wherever you are. And please, be safe out there. You are so important to everyone around you, even me. And as always, this is Grim, and I'm signing off.